Life does not stay where it is. The default state is not balance or stability. It is drift. If you do nothing, your life does not pause. It moves downward, quietly and consistently. Without asking for permission, this is not bad luck. This is how the system works. Drift begins the moment you refuse to choose a direction. Without a clear aim, your mind has nothing to organize around. Your behavior runs on autopilot. Your days fill up, but your life goes nowhere. Not choosing a path feels safe, but it is already a decision, and it is always the same one, down. Most people believe things will work out if they wait long enough. They believe keeping goals vague keeps doors open. It does not. It keeps you uncommitted, unfocused, and easy to push around by circumstances you did not design. Nobody is coming to save you from this. No system, no person, no opportunity will step in and give your life direction. If you do not write it yourself, it will be written for you, and not in your favor. This book does not promise happiness. It does not offer comfort or healing. It offers a way out of drift, a structure, a map, a method to take control before time takes it from you. You now have a choice. Continue drifting, or take authorship. If you are ready to stop sliding and start steering, turn the page. Chapter 1: The Truth About the Drift. There is a comfortable lie that most people live by. The lie says that if you just live naturally, if you do not force anything, if you keep your options open, life will somehow work itself out. This lie sounds peaceful. It feels safe, and it quietly ruins lives. The truth is harsher and far less forgiving. Life does not move toward order on its own. It moves toward decay. If you do not take control, you do not stay where you are. You drift downward, always. The universe does not reward neutrality. Entropy is the default. A car without a driver does not glide safely forward. It rolls until it crashes. A house without care does not remain clean. It fills with dust, mold, and rot. Your life works the same way. If you let go of the wheel, you do not remain free. You lose direction. You lose structure. You lose ground. This is not philosophy. This is reality. Drift is not laziness in the obvious sense. Drift is what happens when a person refuses to choose a clear direction. It is the slow erosion of responsibility disguised as flexibility. You tell yourself you are keeping your options open. In truth, you are avoiding commitment. You are avoiding the pain of choosing one path and closing the others. You think that not choosing protects you from failure. In reality, it guarantees it. Most people do not fail because they are incapable. They fail because their behavior has no anchor, without a target. The mind cannot organize itself without a target. Attention scatters, energy leaks, discipline collapses. When you do not define what you are aiming at, your brain does not know what to filter out, so it absorbs everything. Other people's priorities, other people's fears, other people's definitions of success. You wake up one day living a life that looks busy but feels empty because it was never designed by you. This is where power changes hands. Either you decide where your life is going, or circumstances decide for you. There is no third option. No one is coming to rescue you from drift. Not the government, not your boss, not your family. They all have their own problems, their own agendas. their own survival to manage. If you do not pick up the pen and write your life, the world will happily assign you a role in someone else's story. Picture a 13-year-old washing dishes in a restaurant kitchen. That is not a tragedy. That is a beginning. It teaches discipline. It teaches effort. It teaches the relationship between work and reward. Now, picture a 48-year-old man washing dishes in the same kitchen, at the same sink, with the same future as yesterday. That is not about disrespecting honest work. That is about time wasted without direction. The tragedy is not the job. The tragedy is 35 years without a plan. The difference between those two people is not talent. It is not luck. It is not intelligence. It is authorship. The boy is at the start of a story. The man never wrote one. He let the years pass without choosing where they should lead. Drift did the rest, and drift is patient. It does not destroy you overnight. It waits. It compounds. People cling to vague goals because vagueness feels painless. Saying I want a good life costs nothing. It demands nothing. It exposes nothing. The moment you define success clearly, you also define failure clearly. That is what scares people. A sharp goal creates sharp feedback. You can no longer hide. You can no longer pretend you are doing fine. A fuzzy goal numbs that fear. It works like a painkiller. Immediate relief, long-term damage. Every day without a direction is not neutral. It is negative interest. You are not standing still. You are practicing avoidance. You are training inconsistency. You are rehearsing excuses. Time turns those habits into character. And character sets your ceiling. The longer you drift, the more expensive it becomes to change course, not because it is impossible, but because inertia grows, comfort hardens, regret deepens. Turning around at 20 costs effort, turning around at 40 costs blood. This is the mechanism most people never face. The price of inaction is not paid immediately. It is deferred. It shows up later as bitterness, resentment, and the quiet horror of realizing that you traded your potential for comfort. Drift does not announce itself. It disguises itself as patience, as freedom, as waiting for the right moment. The right moment never comes. There is a way out, and it does not begin with dramatic action. It begins with aim, biologically. You are built to move toward targets. Human eyes are designed to lock onto a point. When you aim, the world organizes itself around that aim. Without it, everything blurs into noise. Opportunities look like chaos. Information becomes overwhelming. With a clear aim, the same world becomes structured. Tools appear, paths reveal themselves. What was invisible becomes obvious. The first step is not running harder. It is stopping and choosing. Writing forces that choice. Writing is not motivational, it is surgical. When you write a specific goal, you force your brain to commit. You force it to define what matters and what does not. You create a point of focus. That single act begins to reverse drift, not because it feels good, but because it restores direction. Do not confuse this with fantasy. This is not about dreaming. This is about orientation. A bad plan is better than no plan. A flawed direction is better than none. 0% effort guarantees failure. 20% clarity creates movement. Movement creates information. Information allows correction. Drift gives you nothing back. This book does not promise happiness. It does not promise comfort. It does not promise healing. It offers something more brutal and more valuable. A map. a way to stop wandering, a way to take responsibility for where your life is headed. Whether you like the truth or not, you are standing at a binary choice. You can continue drifting. You can keep your goals vague. You can protect yourself from the discomfort of failure and pay for it later with regret. Or you can accept the pain of discipline. You can define a direction. You can pick up the pen and take authorship of your life today, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. There is no neutral ground. There is no safe delay. Drift is already working against you. If you are ready to stop floating and start steering, turn the page. The next step is identifying the internal saboteurs that have been quietly undermining you all along. Chapter 6. The Art of Negotiating Your Schedule. Most people think they fail at discipline because they are weak. That is not true. They fail because they design their lives like prisons. They sit down to plan with good intentions and come out with a schedule that feels like punishment. Wake up early. Work non-stop. Do the hardest tasks first. No rest. No reward. No space to breathe. They call this discipline. It is not. It is tyranny. And tyranny always creates rebellion. This is the trap almost everyone falls into. They believe that the only way to control themselves is to become harsher. So they split themselves in two. One part becomes the tyrant, the other becomes the slave. The tyrant writes the schedule. The slave is forced to obey. At first, the slave complies. For a day, maybe 2, sometimes 3. Then the revolt begins. Motivation collapses. Excuses flood in. The schedule is abandoned. And the person returns to the same chaotic life they were trying to escape. Not because they are lazy, because no human being will tolerate slavery, even when the master is themselves. A schedule does not fail because you lack willpower. It fails because you designed it as a punishment instead of a system. You did not create a tool to support your life. You built a cell and wondered why you wanted to escape. This is the moment where your thinking has to change. Discipline is not about forcing yourself harder. It is about structuring cooperation with yourself so that progress can survive longer than a few days. If you want a system that lasts, you must change the relationship you have with yourself. Stop treating yourself like an enemy to be conquered. Start treating yourself like a valuable asset to be managed. Imagine you hired a highly capable employee. You want results from them. You also want them to stay. You would not work them 16 hours a day without rest. You would not deny them breaks, rewards, or dignity. You would negotiate expectations. You would create conditions where effort makes sense and commitment is possible. This is the mindset shift. Do not issue commands. Negotiate terms. When you need to complete a difficult task, ask a different question. Not, how do I force myself to do this? But what does this task cost me? And what do I get in return? If you expect 2 hours of deep, demanding work, there must be something on the other side, a break, a reward, something you actually want. This is not weakness, this is respect. And respect is the foundation of consistency. You cannot demand from yourself what you would never demand from someone else. If you would not treat another human being the way you treat yourself, your system is broken. Discipline without respect does not create strength. It creates resentment. And resentment always wins in the long run. A sustainable day is built on balance, not extremes. Half of your day must be dedicated to responsibility. These are the non-negotiables, the things that keep your life from collapsing, paying bills, doing your work, cleaning what needs to be cleaned, handling the tasks that prevent your life from sliding closer to chaos. These actions are not exciting, but they are protective. They keep you away from consequences you do not want to face. The other half of your day must be built around reward, not fantasy, real reward, things you genuinely enjoy. Coffee without guilt, a short episode of a show, time with your children, a walk, training, rest. A schedule that only contains obligations will be rejected by your nervous system. A schedule that contains both effort and reward is something you can look at in the morning and say, "This day is hard, but it is fair. This ratio matters." Responsibility without reward leads to burnout. Reward without responsibility leads to decay. Balance creates momentum. When your schedule feels fair, you stop negotiating with excuses. You stop needing motivation. You show up because the system makes sense. Most people destroy their schedules by making them too rigid. They plan every minute as if life will cooperate. It never does. Traffic happens. Meetings run long. Children get sick. Unexpected problems appear. A rigid schedule turns normal chaos into perceived failure. You fall behind once and the entire day is ruined. This is not discipline, this is fragility. You must design for chaos. That means scheduling empty space on purpose, time where nothing is assigned, time that exists as a buffer. This space absorbs disruption. It allows recovery. It gives you room to adjust without feeling like you failed. Empty space is not wasted time. It is structural reinforcement. It keeps your system from snapping under pressure. A strong schedule bends. It does not break. It gives you margins. It gives you air. It acknowledges reality instead of fighting it. When you include space to do nothing, you protect your ability to keep going when the day does not go as planned. This is how discipline survives real life. Here is the paradox most people never understand. They want freedom, more free time, less stress, more peace. But freedom is not created by avoiding structure. It is created by committing to it. When you do not schedule your responsibilities, they follow you everywhere. Bills sit in the back of your mind. Work bleeds into rest. Guilt contaminates leisure. You are never truly free because something is always unfinished. When you schedule responsibility properly and execute it early, something powerful happens. The remaining time becomes clean. It belongs to you, not borrowed, not stolen, not filled with guilt. Real freedom is not the absence of structure. It is the reward that structure buys. This is why discipline equals freedom, not in theory. In practice, when you honor a negotiated schedule, you finish what matters sooner. You reduce anxiety. You eliminate background stress. And when the work is done, your rest is real. You are not escaping. You are enjoying. A schedule is not meant to control you. It is meant to protect you from chaos, from drift, from the constant feeling that you are behind. It is not a weapon. It is a contract, one that you must be willing to honor because it was designed with respect. If your schedule keeps failing, stop blaming yourself. Look at the system. If it feels like punishment, it will be rejected. If it feels fair, it will be followed. Discipline is not about domination. It is about alignment, aligning effort with reward, responsibility with rest, structure with reality. This chapter is not asking you to become softer. It is asking you to become smarter. Tyranny produces rebellion. Negotiation produces loyalty. Build a schedule that your future self will agree to follow. Do that consistently, and you will discover the truth most people miss. Structure does not take your freedom, it creates it. Chapter 3. Facing your personal hell. There is a future waiting for you that no one else can see. People around you look at your life right now and say, "You are fine. You have a job. You function. You survive." From the outside, nothing looks urgent. Nothing looks broken enough to demand action. That is the lie that keeps most people trapped. The real danger is not what your life looks like today. The real danger is where it is heading if nothing changes. Only you can see that. Only you can feel it, and if you ignore it. No one will warn you before it is too late. Your personal hell is invisible to the crowd. Society judges the present. It does not calculate trajectories. Friends look at who you are now and assume you will stay roughly the same. They do not see the slow accumulation of bad habits, avoided responsibilities, quiet compromises, and repeated self-betrayals. They do not see what happens when your weaknesses are left in charge for years. You do. You know exactly which parts of you are decaying. You know which behaviors you are tolerating because they feel familiar. You know what you are postponing because it feels uncomfortable to face. That knowledge is not abstract. It is a warning signal. And if you ignore it, the cost will be paid later with interest. Personal hell is not vague. It is specific. For some people, it looks like addiction, debt, and isolation. For others, it looks like a loveless home, a body that is failing, or a life filled with quiet resentment. Different details, same ending, a future where you wake up and realize you waited too long. If you cannot describe that future in concrete terms, you are not safe. You are blind. No one is coming to describe it for you. No one will sit you down and say, "This is where your path ends if you keep drifting." By the time the consequences are visible to everyone else, escape will be much harder. The responsibility to see it early belongs to you. When you begin to look at that future honestly, expect resistance. Humans adapt to danger. We get used to bad conditions. We normalize pain because it feels safer than change. A job you hate becomes tolerable. A body you neglect becomes acceptable. A relationship that drains you becomes normal. This is how people learn to live with the devil they know. The moment you decide to leave that comfort, the environment you came from will push back. Friends will joke. Family will question you. Your own thoughts will whisper that you are overreacting. That is friendly fire. It comes from the same place that taught you to stay small. Do not expect encouragement when you start taking fear seriously. Fear makes other people uncomfortable because it forces them to look at their own avoidance. When you say you are afraid of where your life is going, you break an unspoken agreement. The agreement to pretend everything is fine. The agreement to stay numb together. This is why the road out of personal hell is lonely. Not because people hate you, but because they cannot feel what you feel. They do not carry your future in their body. You do. That makes this your fight. This is where the real work begins. Not in motivation, not in hope, in confrontation. You need to create a clear enemy. And that enemy is your future self if nothing changes. This is not imagination for comfort. This is imagination for survival. Sit alone. Remove distractions. And write. Write a brutal, honest report of where your life will be in 3 to 5 years if you continue exactly as you are. Do not soften the language. Do not protect your ego. Describe your health. Describe your finances. Describe your relationships. Describe your character. Ask yourself one simple question and answer it without mercy. If my worst habits were allowed to run my life freely, where would I end up? The goal is not reflection. The goal is fear. Happiness is a weak motivator. Comfort keeps people asleep. Fear wakes them up. Fear sharpens focus. Fear creates urgency. You do not need a dream pulling you forward yet. You need something chasing you from behind. You need to feel what it would be like to arrive at that future and realize you chose it by doing nothing. If the image does not disturb you, you have not gone far enough. If it does not scare you, you are still lying to yourself. Once you see it clearly, stop asking for approval. Do not explain this process to people who do not need to be saved by it. Do not look for sympathy. Sympathy does not change trajectories. Action does. If you are trapped in a situation you hate, do not beg for it to improve. Build your exit quietly. No announcements, no speeches, no promises, just preparation. Hope does not come from reassurance. Hope comes from knowing you are digging a tunnel out, even if no one sees the progress yet. This is the mechanism most people miss. The moment you have a plan, even a rough one, your suffering changes. The pain does not disappear, but it becomes bearable. You can endure hard days when you know they are temporary. You can tolerate discomfort when it has direction. You do not need applause. You do not need permission. You need proof that you are no longer standing still. The work does not have to be perfect. It has to be real. Eventually, everything comes down to risk. There is no safe path. There never was. One option is to change. That path carries risk. You may fail. You may be rejected. You may be tired. You may look foolish for trying. The other option is to stay exactly where you are. That path also carries risk. A quieter one, a slower one, a guaranteed one. The risk of regret, the risk of decay, the risk of waking up years from now and realizing your life hardened into something you despise. This is the final choice, not between comfort and pain, but between two kinds of danger. Danger A is the risk of action. Danger B is the risk of drift. One hurts now, the other destroys later. You do not get to avoid risk. You only get to choose which one you will carry. The people who win are not the ones who found a safe road. They are the ones who chose the risk that gave them a chance to escape their personal hell. Facing your personal hell is not about drama. It is about honesty. It is about refusing to let the future ambush you. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Once you write it down, you cannot pretend ignorance. From that point on, doing nothing becomes a decision, and that decision has a price. This chapter is not here to inspire you. It is here to corner you into clarity. You either start moving away from that future now, or you accept it as your destination. There is no third option. Chapter 4. The Blueprint Heaven. Hope and the Power of a Bad Plan. Most people fail at this stage for one simple reason. They believe they are supposed to get it right before they begin. They wait for clarity. They wait for certainty. They wait for a perfect plan that makes them feel safe. While they wait, life keeps moving. And because they are not aiming at anything specific, they drift. This chapter exists to end that pattern, not by promising certainty, not by offering motivation, but by forcing you to aim, badly if necessary, and letting your brain do what it was designed to do once an aim exists. You are not confused because you are incapable. You are confused because you have not given your mind a target. The human nervous system does not operate on vague wishes. It operates on aim. This is not philosophy. It is biology. Human eyes evolved the way they did for a reason. We have large visible whites in our eyes so others can see where we are looking. We are hunting creatures. We track moving targets. We coordinate attention. We orient toward what matters. When there is no target, perception collapses into noise. Everything looks the same. Everything feels overwhelming. Nothing stands out. That is what most people call being lost. They are not lost. They are unaimed. The moment you write a goal down, something immediate happens. Not magically, not spiritually, neurologically. Your brain begins filtering reality differently. Before the aim existed, a building was just a building. A conversation was just noise. A person was just a person. After the aim exists, the same world reorganizes. The building becomes a potential location. The conversation becomes useful or irrelevant. The person becomes an ally or a liability. The world did not change. Your filter did. That is the function of aim. You do not see the world as it is. You see the world as it relates to what you are aiming at. No aim means no filter. No filter means chaos. Writing is not about manifesting outcomes. Writing is about giving your nervous system instructions. This is why waiting to feel ready is a trap. Readiness does not precede clarity. Aim creates clarity. And this leads directly into the second problem that stops people here: perfectionism. Most people do not refuse to plan because they are lazy. They refuse because they are afraid. Afraid of being wrong. Afraid of committing to something imperfect. Afraid of seeing their own inadequacy on paper. So they choose nothing. They convince themselves that no plan is safer than a bad one. This is the deadliest lie in the entire process. There is no comparison between 0% and 20%. 0 is not neutral. 0 is drift. 0 is decay. 20% is direction. A bad plan is not a failure. It is a starting position. It tells your brain where to look. It gives feedback. It creates movement. The difference between a bad plan and no plan is the difference between wandering in circles and walking towards something that can be corrected. You do not need to be right. You need to be pointed somewhere. This is where the archetype of the fool matters. The fool moves before he knows. He steps forward without guarantees. He accepts looking stupid today in exchange for competence tomorrow. Every master you respect started as a fool who acted early. The people who wait until they feel smart never move. The ones who accept temporary foolishness gain experience, correction, and eventually precision. You are not being asked to design your final life. You are being ordered to write a bad draft. One that is incomplete, one that has holes, one that you will later revise, but you must write it. No editing, no refining, no polishing. Write it down and stop. Once the aim exists, the next step is to give it enough weight to compete with reality. This is where the heaven script comes in. In the previous chapter, you wrote what happens if you do nothing. That gave you a place to run from. Now, you must write something worth running toward. Not fantasy, not vague success. A future that can justify suffering. Because suffering is not optional. Life will demand payment regardless. The only question is whether your future is heavy enough to make the cost acceptable. You are not asked what would make you happy. Happiness is unstable. You are asked what your life would look like in 3 to 5 years if you treated yourself the way a responsible person treats someone they care about. Write it concretely. Work, health, family, responsibility, contribution. Not in slogans, in specifics. Not "I want to be rich." But what kind of work would make you respect yourself? Not "I want freedom." But what kind of structure would allow you to stand upright under pressure? Your future must be detailed enough that your brain can simulate it. Vague heaven is useless. It cannot compete with immediate comfort. The future you write must also be multidimensional. A goal that only serves ego will collapse under stress. A goal that only serves comfort will not survive boredom. The aim must be strong enough to counterbalance pain. What are you building that protects others? What responsibility are you willing to carry? What kind of person are you becoming? These are not emotional questions. They are structural ones. Your future must justify discipline. If it does not, you will quit when it hurts. Once this is written, something critical happens, even before you act. Your psychological state changes. This is the mechanism of hope. Hope is not optimism. Hope is not positive thinking. Hope is the knowledge that the current pain is temporary and directional. Two people can be in the same brutal situation. One collapses. One endures. The difference is not strength. It is trajectory. If you believe the suffering is endless, the nervous system shuts down. If you believe the suffering is part of a plan, the load becomes bearable. This is why people can tolerate difficult jobs, harsh conditions, and long hours when they know there is an exit strategy. The moment a plan exists, even on paper, the brain releases a different chemical profile. Dopamine shifts from desperation to anticipation. The present becomes a step instead of a sentence. The work does not change. Your relationship to it does. You are no longer trapped. You are preparing. This is not motivation. It is physiology. A plan. Even before execution. Reduces psychological pain because it restores agency. Do not misunderstand this. Hope does not mean relief. It means endurance. You will still be tired. You will still be frustrated, but you will know why you are paying the price, and that knowledge is enough to keep you standing. Finally, you must be warned. The aim you just wrote is probably wrong. Accept that now. If you expect it to be correct, you will break when reality pushes back. The aim is not a destination, it is a compass. You move toward it, and the terrain forces adjustment. This is not failure, this is learning. Progress is not linear, it is zigzag. You move, you miss, you correct. Each deviation gives information. Each correction sharpens the aim. You cannot think your way into the perfect path. You move to learn. Standing still does not produce clarity. Movement does. Every correction is an advance. Every adjustment is proof you are engaged with reality. The only real mistake is refusing to move because the path is not guaranteed. You now have two anchors. A hell you are running from, a heaven you are moving toward. That is enough to begin. But movement without structure collapses. In the next chapter, the question becomes execution. How do you connect daily behavior to this vision without relying on motivation or emotion? How do you build a system that carries you when willpower fails? You have the direction. Next, you will build the structure that makes progress inevitable. Chapter 5. The Dignity of Small Things, the Connection. Every day, you stand at the same crossroads. Even if you do not notice it, the place does not look dramatic. There are no signs, no warnings, no applause. It looks like a sink full of dirty dishes, a crying child, a boring task, a job you do not love. But this is where the direction of your life is decided, not by the size of the action, but by the meaning you attach to it. The same action can either crush you or strengthen you. The difference is not the work. The difference is who you choose to be while doing it. You can look at the mess in front of you and say, "Why is my life like this? Why am I stuck doing low-level work? Why am I wasting my time?" That is the voice of the victim. That voice turns effort into humiliation and responsibility into punishment. Or you can look at the exact same task and say, "This is a necessary step in the future I chose." That is the voice of the builder. One mindset produces resentment, the other produces dignity. Nothing outside changes. Everything inside does. This is where most people break. They write big dreams, big visions, big promises. They imagine a better future, a stronger body, more money, more respect, a better family. Then they wake up the next morning, and nothing has changed. The bank account is the same. The work is the same. The child is still crying. The gap between the dream and the reality feels insulting. If that gap is not connected, it becomes unbearable. The dream starts to feel fake. Motivation dies, and the person slowly returns to drifting. Not because they are weak, but because the pain feels meaningless. The gap only destroys you when it has no bridge. That bridge is built by understanding how small actions connect to big outcomes. This is not poetic. It is mechanical. Every meaningful life is built by decomposing a high aim into daily actions. If you do not do this, your dream stays abstract, and your reality feels like a trap. When you do it correctly, the smallest task becomes a piece of strategy. Start with the highest aim you can tolerate, not something vague, something heavy, something serious, reducing suffering, raising a child who will not become cruel, becoming someone reliable. That is not a fantasy. That is a responsibility. Now break it down. That aim cannot exist in the abstract. It must pass through your hands, through your time, through your effort. It passes through actions like changing diapers, washing dishes, showing up to work, and doing boring things well. When you change a diaper carefully, you are not just performing a hygienic task, you are teaching order. You are teaching care. You are teaching that discomfort can be handled without cruelty. That child absorbs that lesson before they ever understand words. A child raised with care is less likely to grow into someone who lashes out at the world. That is not sentimental. That is causal. A single diaper change does not save the world. Thousands of small, disciplined, caring actions shape a human being who will either add to the chaos or reduce it. This is how micro actions connect to macro outcomes. The same logic applies to work. Washing dishes to earn money is not degrading when it is connected to a direction. It is only degrading when it is meaningless. When you wash dishes because you are afraid of being fired, you are a slave to fear. When you wash dishes because it is the first rung in a ladder you intend to climb, you are acting as the owner of your future. The action is identical. The identity is not. This is where dignity actually comes from. Dignity is not granted by titles. It is not given by status. It is not handed out by other people's opinions. Dignity emerges the moment you voluntarily carry responsibility, the moment you say, "This is mine to handle." You stop being dragged by life and start walking forward under load. Load is not the enemy. Meaningless load is. Life will involve suffering either way. That is non-negotiable. The only choice you get is whether that suffering will rot you or forge you. Pain without meaning is torture. Pain with meaning is sacrifice. Humans can endure almost anything if it serves something higher than comfort. This is not optimism, it is biology and history. People break when they believe their effort leads nowhere. They become dangerous when they believe their suffering is pointless. But when effort is linked to purpose, the same pain becomes tolerable, sometimes even honorable. This is why identity matters. If you see yourself as a powerless worker, being exploited by circumstances, every task feels like theft. If you see yourself as a strategist executing a long-term plan, every task becomes training. The work does not change. The name you give yourself does. You are not just an employee. You are a person developing discipline, attention to detail, and endurance. Those traits do not appear magically when success arrives. They are forged in environments that demand patience and consistency. Do not insult yourself by doing small work carelessly. Do not tell yourself it does not matter. That lie leaks into everything. How you do one thing becomes how you do everything. If you rush, complain, and cut corners when the task feels beneath you, you are training yourself to be unreliable. If you do the work properly, even when no one is watching, you are proving something to yourself. You are proving that your standards are not dependent on praise or reward. This is radical ownership, not ownership of outcomes you cannot control, but ownership of effort, attitude, and execution. When you decide that you will do whatever is in front of you to the best of your ability, not to impress others, but to respect yourself, you stop negotiating with weakness. You stop waiting for better conditions. You become someone who can be trusted. And self-trust is the foundation of any future worth building. At this point, something shifts. The work does not disappear. The fatigue does not vanish. But the bitterness fades. You are no longer trapped in your day. You are using it. The dishes are no longer an insult. They are a brick. The job is no longer a prison. It is a training ground. Each small action fits into a larger structure, and when actions line up with purpose, something rare appears. Freedom. Freedom does not come from escaping responsibility. It comes from choosing it. No one can force a person who understands why they are carrying the load. Once the burden is accepted voluntarily, coercion loses its power. You are no longer reacting. You are executing. That is what it means to be sovereign. You are not free because life is easy. You are free because your effort has direction. Now the day looks different. It is no longer a pile of random tasks. It is a sequence, a set of bricks laid deliberately. Each brick is small. Each brick matters. But bricks alone do not make a wall. Purpose gives you meaning. Action gives you material. To build something solid, you need structure. You need order. You need a way to place the bricks so they support each other instead of collapsing into chaos. You have the aim. You understand the value of the small actions. The next step is organizing them. This is where intention becomes system. This is where discipline becomes visible. This is where you stop relying on mood and start relying on structure. Meaning gave you the reason. Now you need the plan. That plan is your schedule, and without it, even meaningful effort will eventually dissolve. Chapter 6. The Art of Negotiating Your Schedule. Most people think they fail at discipline because they are weak. That is not true. They fail because they design their lives like prisons. They sit down to plan with good intentions and come out with a schedule that feels like punishment. Wake up early, work non-stop, do the hardest tasks first. No rest, no reward, no space to breathe. They call this discipline. It is not. It is tyranny. And tyranny always creates rebellion. This is the trap almost everyone falls into. They believe that the only way to control themselves is to become harsher. So they split themselves in two. One part becomes the tyrant, the other becomes the slave. The tyrant writes the schedule. The slave is forced to obey. At first, the slave complies. For a day, maybe 2, sometimes 3. Then the revolt begins. Motivation collapses. Excuses flood in. The schedule is abandoned, and the person returns to the same chaotic life they were trying to escape. Not because they are lazy, because no human being will tolerate slavery. Even when the master is themselves, a schedule does not fail because you lack willpower. It fails because you designed it as a punishment instead of a system. You did not create a tool to support your life. You built a cell and wondered why you wanted to escape. This is the moment where your thinking has to change. Discipline is not about forcing yourself harder. It is about structuring cooperation with yourself so that progress can survive longer than a few days. If you want a system that lasts, you must change the relationship you have with yourself. Stop treating yourself like an enemy to be conquered. Start treating yourself like a valuable asset to be managed. Imagine you hired a highly capable employee. You want results from them. You also want them to stay. You would not work them 16 hours a day without rest. You would not deny them breaks, rewards, or dignity. You would negotiate expectations. You would create conditions where effort makes sense and commitment is possible. This is the mindset shift. Do not issue commands. Negotiate terms. When you need to complete a difficult task, ask a different question. Not, how do I force myself to do this? But what does this task cost me? And what do I get in return? If you expect 2 hours of deep, demanding work, there must be something on the other side, a break, a reward, something you actually want. This is not weakness. This is respect. And respect is the foundation of consistency. You cannot demand from yourself what you would never demand from someone else. If you would not treat another human being the way you treat yourself, your system is broken. Discipline without respect does not create strength. It creates resentment. And resentment always wins in the long run. A sustainable day is built on balance, not extremes. Half of your day must be dedicated to responsibility. These are the non-negotiables. The things that keep your life from collapsing, paying bills, doing your work, cleaning what needs to be cleaned, handling the tasks that prevent your life from sliding closer to chaos. These actions are not exciting, but they are protective. They keep you away from consequences you do not want to face. The other half of your day must be built around reward, not fantasy. Real reward, things you genuinely enjoy. Coffee without guilt, a short episode of a show, time with your children, a walk, training, rest, A schedule that only contains obligations will be rejected by your nervous system. A schedule that contains both effort and reward is something you can look at in the morning and say, "This day is hard, but it is fair. This ratio matters." Responsibility without reward leads to burnout. Reward without responsibility leads to decay. Balance creates momentum. When your schedule feels fair, you stop negotiating with excuses. You stop needing motivation. You show up because the system makes sense. Most people destroy their schedules by making them too rigid. They plan every minute as if life will cooperate. It never does. Traffic happens. Meetings run long. Children get sick. Unexpected problems appear. A rigid schedule turns normal chaos into perceived failure. You fall behind once and decide the entire day is ruined. This is not discipline. This is fragility. You must design for chaos. That means scheduling empty space on purpose, time where nothing is assigned, time that exists as a buffer. This space absorbs disruption. It allows recovery. It gives you room to adjust without feeling like you failed. Empty space is not wasted time. It is structural reinforcement. It keeps your system from snapping under pressure. A strong schedule bends. It does not break. It gives you margins. It gives you air. It acknowledges reality instead of fighting it. When you include space to do nothing, you protect your ability to keep going when the day does not go as planned. This is how discipline survives real life. Here is the paradox most people never understand. They want freedom, more free time, less stress, more peace, but freedom is not created by avoiding structure. It is created by committing to it. When you do not schedule your responsibilities, they follow you everywhere. Bills sit in the back of your mind. Work bleeds into rest. Guilt contaminates leisure. You are never truly free because something is always unfinished. When you schedule responsibility properly and execute it early, something powerful happens. The remaining time becomes clean. It belongs to you, not borrowed, not stolen, not filled with guilt. Real freedom is not the absence of structure. It is the reward that structure buys. This is why discipline equals freedom, not in theory. In practice, when you honor a negotiated schedule, you finish what matters sooner. You reduce anxiety. You eliminate background stress. And when the work is done, your rest is real. You are not escaping. You are enjoying. A schedule is not meant to control you. It is meant to protect you from chaos, from drift, from the constant feeling that you are behind. It is not a weapon. It is a contract, one that you must be willing to honor because it was designed with respect. If your schedule keeps failing, stop blaming yourself. Look at the system. If it feels like punishment, it will be rejected. If it feels fair, it will be followed. Discipline is not about domination. It is about alignment, aligning effort with reward, responsibility with rest, structure with reality. This chapter is not asking you to become softer. It is asking you to become smarter. Tyranny produces rebellion. Negotiation produces loyalty. Build a schedule that your future self will agree to follow. Do that consistently, and you will discover the truth most people miss. Structure does not take your freedom. It creates it. Chapter 7. Discipline is freedom. The execution. Motivation is a lie people tell themselves to avoid responsibility. It feels useful because it comes with emotion, energy, and temporary clarity. But motivation is not a tool. It is weather. It changes without warning. If your system depends on feeling inspired, It will collapse the moment conditions turn against you. Waiting to feel ready is how goals starve to death. Results are built by people who do what must be done regardless of how they feel. That is not personality. That is maturity. Here is the truth most people avoid. If you only work when you want to, you will never outwork reality. Life does not negotiate with moods. Bills do not pause for low energy. Bodies do not get stronger because intentions were good. The idea that you need to feel like it before you act is a childish belief that keeps adults trapped in cycles of inconsistency. Emotion cannot be in charge. Emotion is unstable. Execution requires something harder and more reliable. There is a category of tasks that do not ask for permission. They are not optional. They are not dependent on enthusiasm. They are simply the things you are supposed to do, the actions that make you stronger, faster, smarter, more capable, and more reliable. Training, planning, writing, showing up. These actions do not require passion. They require compliance. Doing what you are supposed to do, even when you do not want to, is the first real marker of self-command. Discipline begins the moment you stop negotiating with yourself, and discipline is built through a contract, not with the world, with yourself. This is where execution becomes mechanical instead of emotional. The most effective technique is simple and brutal in its honesty. Before you go to sleep, you write down exactly what you will do the next day, not a list of hopes, not a collection of possibilities, a clear set of orders. When morning arrives, your job is no longer to decide, your job is to execute. This ritual matters because decision-making is expensive. Every morning you wake up with limited cognitive resources. If you waste them debating what to do, you are already compromised. Writing the night before removes friction. You wake up with purpose already assigned. You are no longer asking questions. You are following instructions you already agreed to when you were calm and clear. That is leadership over the self. Each time you write 600 run and you complete it the next morning, you reinforce a contract. You told yourself the truth and you honored it. That is how self-trust is built. And self-trust is not a feeling. It is a record. When you repeatedly break promises to yourself, you learn something dangerous. You learn that your word does not matter. Once that belief settles in, every larger dream collapses under its own weight. If you cannot trust yourself with small commitments, you will sabotage every big one. Discipline is not about intensity. It is about reliability. It is about becoming someone whose actions can be predicted. That predictability is not boring. It is powerful. And this leads to the paradox most people misunderstand. Discipline does not reduce freedom. It purchases it. Lack of discipline is the real prison. When you avoid structure, you become owned by consequences. If you refuse to manage money with discipline, debt will dictate your choices. If you refuse to train your body with discipline, weakness and illness will decide your limits. If you refuse to manage time with discipline, urgency and chaos will own your days. This is not theory, it is cause and effect. Discipline is simply choosing your constraints instead of inheriting them by default. When you handle responsibilities early and efficiently, something unexpected happens. Time opens up. Mental noise quiets. The hours that remain are clean. They are not poisoned by guilt or avoidance. That is real freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to enjoy time without the shadow of unfinished obligations. Discipline clears the field so life can be lived without constant internal pressure. This system must survive bad days, not good ones. Anyone can perform when conditions are perfect. Anyone can show up when energy is high and outcomes feel rewarding. Those days do not matter. They are not filters. The real test arrives when nothing feels good. When the weather is bad, when energy is low, when the task feels meaningless, that is when identity is decided, on bad days. The goal is not excellence. The goal is presence. You show up anyway. You do not aim for peak performance. You aim for compliance. You execute the schedule you already negotiated when you were thinking clearly. This is how consistency beats intensity. This is how professionals separate themselves from dreamers. They do not rely on moods. They rely on standards. Showing up on bad days is not glamorous. It will not feel heroic, but it is decisive. Each time you do what you said you would do despite resistance, you deposit credibility into your identity. You become someone who does not disappear when discomfort arrives. That trait compounds faster than talent. Most people quit not because the task is impossible, but because the emotion is unpleasant. Discipline ignores that signal and moves forward. Over time, something shifts. What once required effort becomes default. At first, writing the night before feels forced. Then it feels normal. Eventually, it feels wrong not to do it. This is how behavior becomes identity. You stop trying to be disciplined. You become a disciplined person. Actions repeated under pressure reshape self-image. That is the real compound interest. Identity is not formed by intention. It is formed by evidence. Every executed task is a data point. Over weeks and months, the pattern becomes undeniable. You are no longer someone who hopes. You are someone who executes. That shift changes how you make decisions, what you tolerate, and how seriously you take your own word. By this point, the structure is complete. You have a clear direction. You understand why your actions matter. You have a negotiated schedule that respects reality. And now, you have the discipline to carry it out without relying on emotion. This is the moment where most people think the hard part is over. It is not. Execution attracts resistance. Once you start moving consistently, fear becomes specific. Stakes become real. Exposure begins. The next chapter will address that directly. Discipline gets you to the starting line every day. Courage will be required to keep going when fear finally shows its face. Chapter 8. The Exposure. Courage has been misunderstood for a long time. People think courage means not being afraid. They think brave people wake up confident, fearless, ready to act without hesitation. That belief destroys progress. Fear does not disappear when you decide to change your life. Fear gets louder. It shows up exactly at the moment action matters. If you wait to feel confident before you move, you will wait forever. The truth is simpler and harsher. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the ability to act while fear is present. By this point, you already have structure. You have a schedule. You have commitments. You have written what you are supposed to do today. And yet, when the moment arrives, your body freezes. The phone is in your hand. But you cannot dial. The application is open. But you cannot press submit. Your chest tightens. Your mind searches for excuses. This is not laziness. This is not weakness. This is biology. You are standing in front of the wall. The wall is fear, and it exists for a reason. Your nervous system is designed to detect danger and stop you from acting too fast. Telling yourself to just do it at this moment is useless. It is like pushing someone off a cliff and calling it confidence. This is where most advice fails. It treats fear like an enemy to be crushed instead of a signal to be managed. When fear is too large, forcing action backfires. You do not become braver. You become traumatized. The brain learns the wrong lesson. It learns that action equals danger. The next time, the wall becomes thicker. You do not need a push. You need a ladder. You need a way to approach fear in pieces small enough to survive. Fear must be broken down. A large fear is not a single object. It is a bundle of smaller fears stacked together. When you look at it as one massive threat, your system shuts down. When you divide it into steps, your system adapts. This is the core of exposure. If you are afraid of a task, do not attack the task. Decompose it. Turn one impossible action into 10 tolerable ones. Each step should create mild discomfort, not panic. Discomfort is the training ground. Panic is where learning stops. Think of fear as something you train against, not something you eliminate. If a child is afraid of a needle, you do not restrain them and force the injection. That teaches helplessness. You negotiate. You start small, hold the needle, touch the skin, wait, reward, repeat. The fear does not vanish. The child grows larger than it. The same rule applies to adult life. If you are afraid of elevators, you do not step inside and hope for the best. You look at pictures. You stand near the door. You step in and step out. Each step teaches your brain a simple truth. This is uncomfortable, but it is not fatal. Apply this to your work and your future. If you are afraid of interviews, do not start by sitting across from an employer. Start by opening your resume and looking at it for 5 minutes. Then close it. Next day, read one job listing, nothing more. After that, practice answering one question out loud. You are not trying to win yet. You are teaching your nervous system that engagement does not equal destruction. Step by step, the wall becomes climbable. There is a precise zone where growth happens. Too easy and nothing changes. Too hard and you quit. You must operate at the edge of order and chaos. That is the place where you are slightly afraid but still in control. This requires honesty. If the step feels overwhelming, it is too big. If it feels completely safe, it is too small. Find the middle. That is where adaptation happens. That is where courage is built. There is one rule you must never break. Do not lie to yourself. If you promise that today you will only stand in front of the elevator and not step inside, keep that promise. If you promise yourself you will only draft the email and not send it, keep that promise. Self-trust is fragile. The moment you betray your own agreement, your system learns that your word means nothing. Next time, fear will return stronger, because it knows you are willing to sacrifice yourself for forced progress. Exposure works only when trust is preserved. This process reveals a deeper truth about bravery. You do not become less afraid as you grow. The world does not get safer. New threats appear. Health fails, jobs disappear, relationships end. Fear is permanent. What changes is your capacity to face it through repeated exposure. You discover something critical. You are larger than what you fear, not because fear shrank, but because you expanded. The skill you are building is not how to do one task. It is how to approach fear itself. That is the real advantage. That is the skill that transfers everywhere. Courage is not a feeling you wait for. It is a muscle you train. Each time you complete a small step, you reinforce the behavior. The brain responds to results. When you finish a step, reward yourself. Keep it simple. A coffee, a break, something that signals completion. The message to your system is clear. This pain led to something good. Over time, resistance decreases, not because fear disappears, but because the cost-benefit calculation changes. By now, you understand the sequence. You learned how to plan. You learned how to commit. Now you know how to move when fear blocks the path. Exposure turns intention into motion. It allows discipline to survive contact with reality. You are no longer waiting to feel ready. You are training yourself to move while afraid. This does not mean the fight ends here. The terrain ahead is unstable. Goals shift, plans break, progress zigzags. But you now possess the skill required to adapt. You can approach uncertainty without freezing. You can advance without pretending fear is gone. That is what prepares you for the next phase. The battlefield will change. Your direction will need adjustment. The next chapter will teach you how to move when the path is no longer straight. Chapter 9. The Zigzag Path. Move, miss, adjust. Most people do not fail because they chose the wrong path. They fail because they refused to move until the path looked perfect. They sit still. They think. They calculate. They wait for certainty that never arrives. While they wait, time keeps moving. Opportunities shift, and reality changes without them. This chapter exists to end that paralysis. You do not learn by standing still. You learn by moving. Motion is not the reward. Motion is the teacher. If you stay where you are, everything you know is limited to what you already know. That information set is incomplete. It will always be incomplete. You cannot sit on a couch and design a flawless 5-year plan because the data you need only appears after you begin. Clarity does not precede action. Action produces clarity. Every attempt to reverse that order ends the same way: hesitation, doubt, and drift. The mind wants guarantees. Life does not offer them. Movement is the price of information. This is not a motivational idea. It is a practical one. In dynamic environments, perfect planning is a liability. In the military, if you wait too long to finalize a plan, the target moves, terrain changes, conditions shift. By the time you step forward, you are already late. That is why the rule is simple: plan well enough to move. Then adjust while engaged. Life is not static. Treating it like a fixed puzzle is how people get stuck. A plan is not meant to be correct. It is meant to get you moving. Once you move, the real process begins. It never looks like a straight line. You aim, you step forward, you discover you are drifting left. That is a zig. You correct, you move again. You discover you are drifting right. That is a zag. This is not chaos. This is how orientation works. Navigation requires error. Error reveals direction. The closer you get to the target, the smaller the deviations become. People panic at the first zig. They assume something is wrong. Nothing is wrong. The system is working. The fantasy of a straight path is the most dangerous idea in modern culture. It convinces people that deviation equals failure. It teaches them to stop the moment reality pushes back. But real progress oscillates. It advances through correction. Every meaningful pursuit follows this pattern. Those who expect perfection early quit. Those who expect correction survive. The path is not broken because it bends. It bends because you are learning. This is where the archetype of the fool becomes essential. The fool moves before mastery. He acts without full understanding. He accepts mistakes as the cost of entry. He looks incompetent at first because competence is earned, not imagined. The Savior is not born wise. The Savior is the fool who stayed in motion long enough to learn. Anyone who refuses to look foolish today guarantees mediocrity tomorrow. Fear of embarrassment is one of the strongest anchors holding people in place. Mistakes must be redefined if you are going to move. A mistake is not a verdict, it is information. When you execute a plan and discover it does not work, you have not failed. You have advanced your understanding. You now know one route that does not lead where you want to go. That knowledge did not exist before action. The moment you identify a wrong path, you eliminate it. That is progress, not emotional progress, strategic progress. Think clearly about this. If you never act, every option stays open in your head, and none of them are real the moment you act. Some doors close. That feels threatening. In reality, it is liberating. Closed doors reduce noise. They narrow focus. They bring you closer to what fits. Trying something and discovering it is wrong is not a retreat. It is an intelligence advance. You now operate with better data than you had yesterday. Imagine you believe you want a specific career. You study it. You practice. After 3 months, you realize you hate the work. This is not a disaster. This is a gift. You did not waste time. You saved years. You removed an illusion. You narrowed the field. People who never test their assumptions carry false identities for decades. They protect ideas instead of building lives. Action cuts through fantasy. That is its value. However, correction requires discipline. Without structure, constant adjustment becomes drift. You cannot change direction every week and call it learning. That is avoidance. Real zigzag movement has rules. You commit to a plan long enough to gather meaningful data. Then you evaluate. Then you update. The standard window is 4 to 6 months, long enough to test, short enough to adapt. Anything shorter is impatience. Anything longer without review is stubbornness. The rule is blunt. Write your plan. Execute it hard for 4 to 6 months. Do not negotiate with your emotions during that window. Do not abandon the process because it feels uncomfortable. Discomfort is expected. After the window closes, you stop. You look up. You assess results honestly. Then you revise. This is not quitting. This is calibration. This cycle prevents drift while preserving flexibility. There is another effect most people miss. When you return to a plan after months of execution, you see proof. Either you moved further than you expected, or you became wiser than you were. Both outcomes strengthen self-trust. You stop relying on motivation because evidence replaces it. You begin to respect your ability to follow through, to adjust, to continue. That confidence is not imagined. It is earned through repeated cycles of action and review. All of this only works if you protect the aim. Methods change, routes change, tools change. The target does not. You must learn the difference between strategy and tactics. Tactics are flexible. Strategy is fixed. You can change jobs. You can change skills. You can take detours. You cannot lose sight of the highest aim. Reduce suffering. Constrain what destroys. Build something that makes your effort worth the cost. That is the North Star. Everything else is negotiable. Tunnel vision on the aim does not mean blindness. It means refusal to be distracted by temporary noise. You accept bends in the road without questioning the destination. You correct course without rewriting your values. You allow zigzags without abandoning direction. People fail here because they confuse flexibility with weakness. In truth, rigidity breaks. Adaptation survives. Here is the promise you are allowed to believe. If you keep moving and keep correcting, you will arrive, not because you were perfect, not because you were lucky, but because persistence with feedback is unbeatable. Perfection never reaches the finish line. Relentless adjustment does. You do not win by avoiding error. You win by correcting it faster than you quit. This chapter ends with a warning. Knowing how to zigzag does not protect you from collapse. Sometimes you will not just drift. You will fall. You will fail publicly. You will lose something you thought was secure. When that happens, this framework still applies, but the stakes are higher. Movement becomes survival. Correction becomes rebirth. The final chapter will show you how to rise from impact, not by pretending nothing happened, but by using the fall as fuel. You now know how to move without needing a straight road. Next, you will learn how to stand back up when the road disappears. Chapter 10. Exit Strategy and Rebirth, the Phoenix. No plan survives contact with reality. You can think things through carefully. You can write clearly. You can aim high and prepare well. And still, life will knock you down. This is not pessimism. This is the operating condition. In war, commanders understand one brutal truth: the enemy gets a vote. The moment the shooting starts, the battlefield changes. Targets move. Assumptions collapse. What looked solid on paper dissolves under pressure. Life works the same way. You will be laid off. You will get sick. The market will crash. People you trusted will leave. The question is not if your plan will be challenged. The question is whether you are capable of adapting without breaking. Rigidity is death. Adaptability is survival. And survival, done correctly, turns into strength. The mistake most people make is confusing a failed plan with a failed self. When conditions change, they panic, they freeze, or they jump blindly, hoping courage will replace preparation. It will not. Courage without structure is just chaos. When the plan stops working, the correct move is not denial and not impulse. The correct move is adjustment. This is where intelligent people separate themselves from emotional ones. There will be moments when your current position becomes unbearable, a job that drains you, a relationship that suffocates you, an environment that is slowly killing your momentum. At that point, many people romanticize escape. They quit dramatically, they burn bridges, they leap off a cliff and call it bravery. It is not bravery, it is stupidity. Starving does not make you noble. Panic does not make you free. Leaving without a plan does not make you strong. It makes you vulnerable. An exit must be built, not imagined. You do not jump off a cliff. You build a bridge. You use the pain of your current position as fuel, not as an excuse. While you are still employed, you rewrite your resume, you learn skills quietly, you train for interviews in private, you prepare options while collecting a paycheck. This is not betrayal. This is responsibility. The rule is simple. Look for your next position while you still have leverage. Desperation destroys judgment. Preparation restores power. Endure the current discomfort for 3 to 6 months with intention, not passively. Actively. Each day becomes part of an extraction plan. You are no longer trapped. You are undercover. You are gathering tools. You are strengthening your position. This changes everything. The job does not magically improve, but the suffering loses its poison. It is temporary. It has an end date. You are not stuck. You are transitioning. This is where hope enters, not as fantasy, but as mechanism. Hopelessness does not come from hard work. It comes from believing the pain will never end. When you think this is forever, your nervous system collapses. When you know this ends in 6 months, the same workload becomes manageable. Hope is not a feeling. It is a timeline. A clear exit strategy turns misery into a training phase. You are no longer a victim of circumstance. You are an operator running a long game. You can endure an extraordinary amount of pressure when you know it serves a purpose. The light at the end of the tunnel does not need to be bright. It just needs to be real. With a plan in place, your posture changes, your mind sharpens. You stop complaining because you are too busy executing. The current position becomes a temporary gym. It is not where you live, it is where you train. But no exit is permanent. No victory lasts forever. This is the deeper lesson. The goal you are running toward now is not the final destination. As you move, you change, you become more capable, more informed, more resilient. And the target that once pulled you forward may eventually become too small. This is not failure. This is evolution. A static plan for a dynamic life is another form of death. That is why self-authoring never ends. You do not write your life once. You write it in cycles. Execute hard for 4 to 6 months. Then stop. Pause deliberately. Assess honestly. Rewrite without sentimentality. Do not tweak daily. That creates confusion. Do not cling for years. That creates stagnation. The cycle is simple and unforgiving, right? Execute. Review, rewrite. Each loop raises your standard. As you move through these cycles, an uncomfortable truth emerges. The version of you who wrote the first plan cannot carry the next one. That person had limited information and limited strength. They served their purpose. Then they must be left behind. The fool who started the journey dies along the way. In their place stands someone more precise, more disciplined, more dangerous. That person needs a higher aim. Clinging to old goals out of nostalgia is another way people stall. This is rebirth, not emotional, structural. You shed outdated identities. You release plans that no longer match your capacity. You do not mourn them. You outgrow them. Each cycle burns away weakness and reveals something harder underneath, like the phoenix. You do not rise because life was kind. You rise because you learned how to rebuild after fire. Here is the final truth, and it matters. You cannot control tragedy. You cannot control chaos. You cannot control loss, but you always control authorship. What happens to you is not the same as what you write next. This book does not save you. It hands you the pen. You decide whether you use it. Every time you fall, you have a choice. Stay down and let the story end. Or write again, adjust again, execute again. You will fall. That is guaranteed. You will miscalculate. You will lose ground. You will be wrong. But as long as you can still write a plan and still show up to execute it, you are not defeated. You are between versions. That is not the end. That is the process working as designed. This chapter is not a conclusion. It is a handoff. The responsibility is now fully yours. No more instructions, no more explanations. Just a cycle you must commit to running for the rest of your life. Write with honesty, execute with discipline, update without mercy. And when the fire comes, as it always does, rise again with structure instead of emotion. Get after it.